Hi everyone, very good evening. Welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. My name is Alpa Sharma and I hope everything's clearly audible and visible to everyone. It's so good to see you guys back here. Very good evening. I hope everything's great and I hope you've been doing really good as well. If you could quickly confirm that I'm clearly audible and visible, we shall start. Commence with the agenda of the session, that is discussing what to read if you're preparing for CLAT or any other law entrance examination for that matter of fact. So the idea is that, there's a lot of fuss, a lot of confusion about what to read. Should we read? Shouldn't we read? Of course, we are recommended that we should read newspapers, but is there anything else that I could read to improve my efficiency in the entire paper? That's what we're going to be talking about in the entire session. Good evening, Sanjana. I hope everything's clearly audible and visible to you. Hi, dear. So, before I start off with the session, very quickly have a look at our achievers right here, and I'm sure you can grab a place here too. Just work really hard, read a lot, and I'm sure by the time December or January happens, your picture is going to be here. I'm waiting for your picture to be here very soon. Okay, so let's talk a little about reading before I give you my high recommendations. One, this session is not going to recommend you books for GK or for reasoning or for maths. No, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to be talking about one thing, and that's reading. Because CLAT or ALET or SLAT, almost every law entrance examination now predominantly focuses on reading. What do I read beyond the newspapers? If I can recommend you something that's going to make reading a pleasure for you, yet you can learn many things out of it. That's what the session focuses on. All right, golden words. So if you need to just stick with me till the end, yeah? So I'm going to recommend a lot of good books to you. Again, to the question, this class doesn't focus on, okay, read this book for GK, this book for maths. No, that's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how, because there's a big question that's there in a lot of your minds, and that is, ma'am, I find reading boring. How many of you find reading boring? Tell me this. How many of you don't find reading a pleasure at all? I'd like to know that from you first before I suggest any books to you. Yeah, I can do that. So how many of you don't find reading with any pleasure at all? You find it boring. There's no interest in reading for you. How many of you are on that stage? Anyone? No? Because see, even if you don't say it publicly, I know of a lot of students who don't find reading pleasurable at all. Reading is only a thing that they do because they're preparing for a law entrance examination that focuses a lot on reading. So the idea is recommending some books to you through which you can fall in love with reading. Recommending some books to you that will aid to your preparation for CLAT. It's a curated list that I've made, and this will either make you fall in love with reading, or if you don't love it at all, you would certainly be a person with more knowledge by the time you're done reading the book. So these are the recommendations that I've brought for you. Of course, the agenda is that since most of these law entrance examinations focus on reading, there's no escaping from that. We can't escape reading. Every topper that you speak to, they'll tell you one thing that I did before I sat for my examination was I read a lot. I read newspapers. I read other things as well. So what are those other things that I can read that might improve my vocabulary, might improve my reading comprehension skills, might improve my comprehension and speed as well? Because your entire examination focuses on how fast and how efficiently you can read. So, of course, CLAT and other law entrance examinations, they expect the students to be readers. There's no escaping from that. You have to read. The more you read, the better you get. But how do we start, ma'am? What do I start with? I find it boring. I find it interesting. So I have some books for people who find reading interesting. I have some books for people who find books boring as well. So what are we going to read? That's what we're going to be discussing. And remember, one suggestion before I commence with the list that I have for you. See, you have to read. And I'm sure you already have started reading newspapers. If you are not doing it, I might sound really blunt here, but the chances of a person getting into the best of the NLUs without reading the newspapers, I haven't come across any in my 12 years of teaching for CLAT aspirants. So this is something that's an inevitable part of your preparation strategy. Lately, if you look at the Hindu or the Indian Express, Hindu specifically with the text and context page has started giving us beautiful articles. Everyone who doesn't read the Hindu, please find the text and context page. Once in every 2 days, you find one article that's, I could send a heart to the article. It's so nice. So make sure you read those text and context articles. Indian Express, you read Indian Express, you read the Hindu. I'm okay with either of the newspapers. At times, I would expect you to read some articles from the Guardian, the New York Times, and the Aeon as well. So make sure you read from a variety of sources. But are these books? No, they aren't. So we're going to be focusing on reading books. Hi Anil, good evening, and everyone else who joined me late. So make sure you are already a reader, but make sure you're not a hoarder. Every session I keep repeating this. A hoarder is somebody, okay, I'm going to ask my parents to get me 10 books that ma'am has recommended. I'm going to buy all of them and they're going to be eating dust on my shelf. Don't be one of those people. You can find almost every PDF online. If you find reading in a PDF boring and monotonous, find a hard copy. These books that I'm going to recommend are supremely popular books. You can find these in any of the secondhand stores as well. Do not be a hoarder. Buy any one of the books according to the plot that I'm going to tell you. Choose one book that you will start with and gradually you can move on to the other books that I recommend here. Every book will have a reason why I have recommended that book, or if it is not a book, there are other reading sources that I'm going to recommend as well. So let's start talking about the list that I have. The first book that I have in the list today is none other than Harper's most popular writing, that's To Kill a Mockingbird. So Atticus, his story, this is how the book looks like. I would recommend this book to anyone and everyone, be it a law aspirant or not. I just cut it. I was peeling a potato and the knife just slid. So that is what happened to my finger. And then there's this band-aid that my daughter brought me, which dinos on it. So that's why it looks a little weird, but back to it. This is one book that I would recommend to anyone and everyone. Be it a reader, a non-reader, a law aspirant, a non-law aspirant, you have to read this book. This book, by the end, you might shed a tear or two, but you will learn a lot of things. How many of you have read this book already? I'd like to know that from you. I'm sure you've heard of the book. There's a movie made on the same book as well, but I wouldn't recommend the movie. I would recommend you read the book. There's rarely, very, very few movies that turn out as good as the books do. So this is my first recommendation. Read To Kill a Mockingbird. Read Atticus's story. Here, there's a white, I mean, if I'm allowed to use the word black and white, because that's how you discriminate racially. So there's a white lawyer who fights a case for a black person who has been accused of a crime, and there's mob lynching happening, and Atticus stands to protect him. So there's a story of friendship, and there's a story of brotherhood, and there's a story of children, and there's a story of lawyers. You read a lot of things here. So if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend this. Okay, that's a very good question, Gauri. Absolutely, yes. I'll tell you the reason why. I don't have a lot of books. This book is not a very long one as well. So the curated list that I've made, once you go on with me towards the end of the class, the list is not a very long one and the list has shorter ones, because this will introduce you to the other kinds of writing as well. Gauri, do you remember The Cat in the Rain? Do you remember Arthur Conan Doyle's story about multiple detectives? If you remember that, you would know CLAT gives you many extracts from books and novels. That writing style is going to be completely different from what you see in newspapers or any of the blogs for that matter of fact. So I would highly recommend that you read some of these, at least some of these, that will aid you with many, many things. I have a list that will help you with GK. I have a list that will help you with vocabulary. I have a list where books are not going to be boring. Reading 5 pages per day doesn't take up a lot of time. Before you go off to sleep, make sure you read 5 pages. So instead of scrolling through Instagram and watching reels, if this is what we do, I'm sure we're going to be better people by the end of the 4 months. How many books are recommended to be read before 2023? As many as you can, Dwanit. As many as you can. So, 4, 5 pages every day, more if the book is more interesting, but don't miss out on your preparation, okay? So that's the first book that I'd recommend. Let's come to the second book that we have. As I had said, the list that I've curated is not merely about reading. It's about your inclination towards law. It's about judgments. It's about GK. It's about legal aptitude as well. So when you read these books, you prepare simultaneously for many other sections as well, because the entire paper is going to be reading based. So the second book that I'd recommend would be Landmark Judgments That Changed India by Ashok K. Ganguly. There are many other books written on landmark judgments. This is one of the most popular ones and something that I would highly recommend you choose. There's a PDF or free PDF available online as well. So you could probably read some judgments and leave some judgments, but ultimately you'll be accustomed to the writing style of judgments that might appear in your legal reasoning section as well, or GK for that matter of fact. So this is the second book that I have as a recommendation. If any of the books that you've read is there in the list, make sure you tell me then and there so that I appreciate you for your reading and your choice. Ma'am, this book it is absolutely exactly Dwanit. So as I had said, there are many, many more books on landmark judgments. This certainly has my heart. These are one of my favorites that I've brought, books that I've read, and books that I would recommend over the years and years and years of teaching law aspirants and seeing them into their dream NLU. So this is what I have. That's the second book. Make sure you take a screenshot of that, or you could write down a list because there are only few books. Let's look at the third book, everyone. So this is not a book. It's basically a letter. I think before reading anything else, this is what you should read tonight. If you are a law aspirant, if you wish to see yourself in a law school 1 year down the line, this is your guide to your law school. It beautifies law school. It makes a picture of your life there, the institution, the teachers, the struggle, everything comes out for real. It's a letter to a young law student. There is another book called A Letter to a Law Student or Letters to Law Students. Don't read that book. Read this one, Letter to a Young Law Student. You will find this PDF available online for free. You've read The Alchemist. That's a very good book as well. It's very good for starters. So, but then it will teach you good vocabulary. Will it teach you any GK? Will it teach you anything about law? Probably not. So that's why the book doesn't have a place here in the list that I have. Okay. So back to it. Letter to a Young Law Student. If you watching this session after the session has ended, and if you've read any one of it, make sure you comment under the video and tell me that you've loved the book, because this list, a lot of effort goes behind creating this list, reading them and then recommending them. So that's the next one. Let's move on with the next one. We the People, Nani A. Phalkiwala. If you are a law aspirant, I'm sure you must have heard of his name. There are many books written by Nani A. Phalkiwala. There are many articles, journals written by him. We the People. And you know, I think this is one book that you could pick up almost today or tomorrow, because the idea of our constitution and our country being a free country and the struggle of independence, everything is so new in our heart today, because yesterday was 15th of August. Everything is new, fresh in our mind. You can absolutely correlate to this book. Highly, highly acclaimed Nani A. Phalkiwala. I would highly recommend this book as well. Have you read the book? Yes? Anyone? Yeah, okay. I haven't read the book yet, Dwanit. So I couldn't comment on that, but I've read many books on Mahabharata and its analysis and Ramayana and its analysis. If you are keen into mythology, you could read that as well. So this is the next book. The next book in the list is here. Kafka and the many books he's written. You could pick up any one. You could pick up the Metamorphosis. You could pick up the Trial. I have mentioned the Trial because it correlates with the thought process a law student goes through. So if you've read Metamorphosis, you have my applause here. If you haven't, you could pick up The Trial as well. There are many books Franz Kafka has written. One of the most popular, of course, becomes The Metamorphosis, and the second most popular becomes The Trial. So The Trial is another book that I'll highly recommend in the list. Obviously, the name suggests it's about the courtroom and the lawyers fighting. Go ahead, read this book. A little difficult it might be because Kafka's writing isn't very simple, but if you are in for a good read, this is one for you. The next one. Now, this book is for the beginners and the non-beginners as well. Beginners, because sometimes people aren't able to devote a lot of time finishing an entire book and waiting desperately for the end. There are some short stories that you could read. When I name short stories, Gift of Magi, O. Henry, one of the classics. There are many short stories here. Gift of Magi is one of them. You could read this book. There's another book that I could recommend here by Jhumpa Lahiri, that's Interpreter of Maladies. I'll write the name here. Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. That's a Pulitzer Prize winning book. Dhruv, just choose one of them. Just choose one, whatever you like, okay? So, by Jhumpa Lahiri. You could read this one. You could also read The Gift of Magi by O. Henry. Beautiful interpretation and short stories. You can read 5 pages, 10 pages, and you're done in a night. You don't have to read the entire book for that. Interpreter of Maladies even smaller than that. So probably one sitting and you can finish off the entire short story. You have a closure. Have you? Yes, Sanjana, it is an amazing book. I'm so glad you can correlate with the list that I've created. So all of those people who don't have the patience to sit for the entire night and finish and you want to know the end, this is for you. Any one of these two recommendations, you could pick them up. The next one. This is also a set of short stories, Chekhov's many stories. The Lady with the Toy Dog is one of them. So another recommendation of a short story is The Lady with the Toy Dog. Simple written. So I would now recommend, Dhwani, that you pick it up. If you think you're weak in one of the genres, that's the whole idea. See, guys, why have I curated this list from a variety of topics is that because you don't know what topic the examiner might give you. It might be literature, it might be art, it might be politics, it might be philosophy. You have to be okay with all of them. And you need to be reading them fast and interpreting that fast as well. And that's why multiple genres are covered up here in the list. You could pick up anything that you're uncomfortable with as well. Just don't hate me for the recommendation that I've made. So, another set of short stories, The Lady with the Toy Dog, Anton Chekhov's many books. This is the most popular one. And then this is the best one of all of the books that I've recommended, 12 Angry Men. I would highly recommend this book. I would equally recommend the movie as well. A very small movie, 1 hour long. I'm sure you've heard of the movie. You might not have heard of the book. So I'll not tell you what happens towards the end, but I'll tell you what this book is about. And this movie is about. This movie has had a place in almost every IIM, in almost every NLU as a case study, where there's a young student, a young boy, where there's an allegation of he committing a crime, and there's a jury of 12 men, where 11 of them believe that this boy has committed the crime, but only one believes he hasn't committed the crime. How this one person goes on to convince these 11 people of the fact that this young boy hasn't committed the crime. The story is about that. It's a part of many NLUs. It's a part of of many IIMs as case studies. So if you haven't seen the movie, you can watch it 1 hour long, read the body language, look at their acting, read the convincing power this one man has, and come back to me and say a thank you if you've loved it. Okay, ma'am, now only started my preparation. If I start to heed my concentration to reading book, how will I clear my syllabus without coaching? Sanjana, you need to read from a variety of sources and you need to be a reader. There's no shortcut to that. The more you read, the better you get with reading comprehensions, specifically with the paper that's completely based on reading. On and off, reading one book in good 15 days will do a lot of good to you. So you can't 5 pages, 6 pages, exactly, it wouldn't harm your prep. Probably the same amount of time a lot of people spend on watching reels and watching, I don't know what all on social media. Devote that time to reading. You'll come back to me and say a thank you. So, 12 Angry Men. Start reading it today. Watch the movie over a chutti and enjoy this and come back and say a thank you to me. And then I cannot wind up my session without recommending these very, very popular books. How can my recommendation for reading books go without recommending this good old thick red book that lies in most of your closets in the corner with a lot of dust on its cover? How many of you have this book unopened? So you have to choose, Sanjana. You have to choose, not read all, but choose. Exactly. So if it's there in your cupboard eating dust, open this today, clean it up and start with the first page. Okay? If you brought it, very good. But the idea is to read it. Okay? Definitely. So start this thick book. Don't be, turned off with the thickness the book has. It is one of the best books you will ever come across that will make you happy and comfortable with vocabulary. So, What Power Made Easy by Norman Lewis. Okay, so, ma'am, I'm not able to read PDF in my area. The hard copy of the newspapers are available. That's the best, Raj. I always read hard copies of the newspaper. I never read it online. Hi Ranganathan, you have a doubt that mocks. Okay, Ranganathan, I'll answer your mock doubts towards the end. But then when I talk about this red thick book, I need to talk about one red thin book as well. Because I'm recommending books for English and your preparation. This one red thin book, even more popular than the one that's mentioned here, has to be Renan Martin. Was it Norman Lewis? It has to be Renan Martin, English Grammar and Composition. If you don't have the book, buy it. Take a hard copy from any of the second-hand stores. Borrow it from your school friends. There's a separate answer key that's available. Even more popular than What Power Made Easy is Ren and Martin. That's there in almost every household. Be very attentive with its grammar. I'm sure it's going to help you with ALET, with Jamia and other law entrance examinations and its preparation. Yeah, that has to be Ren and Martin. 1 hour, can we complete at least 4 sessions of this book? Yeah, absolutely, Raj. You easily can do that. And please suggest me ways to improve my critical reasoning. Oh, okay. Dia, for critical reasoning, you need to be very clear with your basic fundamentals of critical reasoning. Okay, guys, before I recommend anything about critical reasoning or your mock scores or anything else, a few things. If you're still watching it live, make sure you like the session. And if you're watching it recorded, make sure you comment under the video and tell me if you've loved the recommendation, if you've read any of the books and what you think about those books and the stories. Make sure you share with everyone because it's a session that I would want everyone to watch. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Now, this week, towards the end of the week, I think probably Thursday, I have a session on Ask Me Anything. So, Ranganathan, the doubts like you have, the doubts like Dia you have, I would recommend you come to my Ask Me Anything session and ask your doubts regarding your critical reasoning preparation and your mocks and other strategy related doubts that you have. because this session focuses on book recommendation. I'd like to talk about book recommendations today. Thursday, I have another session with you where you can ask me anything. So for that, you need to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any of our sessions. Cheapest, oh, Himanshu, I can't answer that. Okay, Ranganathan, I'll answer that towards either in your class or in the Ask Me Anything session. So that is all for today, everyone. Are there any more questions that you have? Okay, so bye everyone. Have a very, very good evening. Read a lot and have a happy reading. God bless you.